The night sky was on fire. The transport ship had been torn apart in silence, its metal body glowing like a broken star as it fell toward the deserted planet. Ilara's body slammed against her seat as alarms screamed. She reached for her harness, but the straps burned her skin as the pod spun through the atmosphere. Heat swallowed her, and she thought this was the end. Then, impact. The pod hit the ground with a force that knocked the air from her lungs. The world spun, then went black. When Ilara woke, she could taste blood in her mouth. Her ears rang. Smoke curled from the broken escape pod. She pushed herself up slowly, her body trembling. The first thing she saw was sand, endless sand stretching into the horizon, broken by sharp black rocks. Above, the sky glowed a strange green, and lightning flashed far away in the distance. Her breath came fast. She was alive, but not alone. On the ground near her lay a figure, large and motionless. Its skin shimmered in the dim light, not like human skin. Its armor was cracked, covered in ash. A helmet lay to the side, revealing a face with ridges along the jaw, eyes closed tight. Ilara froze. It was an alien. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The war was still fresh in her memory. Her people had fought his kind. She had seen the destruction they caused. And now one of them was right in front of her, bleeding, helpless. She grabbed a jagged piece of metal from the wreckage and held it like a knife. Should she kill him now? Her body shook. Every story she had ever heard told her to run or fight. But then she saw the blood seeping from his side, thick and dark, staining the sand. His breathing was shallow, his chest rising and falling in uneven bursts. If she left him, he would die. If she helped him, he might kill her later. The wind howled around her, carrying the sound of something else, something moving in the distance. Ilara turned her head sharply. Across the sand, far but approaching, she saw shadows slipping between the rocks. Creatures. The way they crawled made her stomach twist. She looked back at the alien. He was still unconscious. Her choices narrowed in her mind. She could run and try to survive alone on a strange, barren world with no supplies. Or she could risk everything and pull this alien with her, trusting he might not wake up and kill her. Her hands shook as she crouched beside him. His body was heavy, his skin strangely warm under her fingers. She dragged him toward the pod using all her strength, her breath tearing out in gasps. Sand filled her shoes, scratched her face, but she did not stop. The shadows in the distance were getting closer. She heard the faint screech of something hungry. Inside the broken pod, she pushed the alien against the wall. He groaned faintly, his eyes flickering open for a moment. Golden light shone in them, eyes not like hers. He tried to lift his hand, but then his arm dropped, and he fell back into darkness. Ilara backed away, clutching her metal shard. She didn't trust him. She didn't trust this planet. But her instincts screamed that leaving him outside had been the right choice. She blocked the pod's entrance with pieces of wreckage, building a weak barrier against whatever creatures hunted in the night. Then she crouched by the fire that had started from a leaking wire, letting the warmth steady her shaking hands. Every second she glanced at the alien. His chest rose and fell. He was alive. She whispered to herself, trying to stay calm. Just survive the night, one night, that's all. But outside the pod, the shadows circled. Yellow eyes blinked in the dark, waiting. And Ilara knew. Her only chance of survival was tied to the very creature she had been raised to fear. The night dragged on like a slow knife cutting through Ilara's nerves. Every howl from the desert made her grip the piece of metal tighter. The alien lay against the pod wall, breathing unevenly, his body twitching sometimes as if locked in a fever. She wanted him to stay unconscious. At least then he could not harm her. But as the green sky shifted to gray morning light, he stirred. Ilara froze. His golden eyes flickered open, glowing faint in the dim light. They locked onto hers. She expected rage, violence, or sudden attack. Her heart pounded. But instead, he blinked slowly, groaned, and pressed a clawed hand to his wounded side. He tried to rise. Ilara leapt back, metal shard ready. He swayed, then sank to one knee. His armor cracked further, pieces falling to the ground. When his gaze lifted again, she saw something she had not expected. Pain. He reached for his weapon lying near the broken pod door. Ilara's breath caught. If he picked it up, she would have to strike first. But to her shock, he dragged it across the floor and pushed it away from both of them. Her grip loosened slightly on her makeshift knife. The alien raised one hand, palm outward. A universal sign of peace. Ilara's mind screamed that it could be a trick. Yet outside the pod, the creatures from the night still waited. She saw fresh tracks in the sand. If they smelled weakness, they would attack again. Alone, she had no chance. With him, maybe. But how could she trust an enemy? The alien groaned again, pressing his side. Blood seeped through his armor, thicker now. He muttered something in his own language, harsh sounds, deep and guttural. She could not understand, but the tone was clear. He was asking for help. Ilara's throat tightened. She did not lower her weapon, but she stepped closer. She tore a strip from her jumpsuit and pressed it against his wound. He hissed, his body stiffening, eyes flashing. She almost pulled away, but then he let out a shaky exhale and allowed her to tie the cloth. Their eyes met again. Not enemy. Not yet friend. Something else. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, burning her skin. The desert stretched out endless, no sign of water. She knew they needed to move, to find shelter before the next storm. Ilara gestured toward the horizon, then mimed walking. The alien followed her motion with his eyes, then gave a slow nod. He tried to stand, his legs trembling, but he managed. His size was massive compared to her. She felt like a shadow beside him. Yet she could see his weakness. Each step was agony. They left the broken pod behind, carrying only scraps and a faint hope of finding something better. The silence between them was heavy, filled only with the sound of their feet on the sand. Sometimes he pointed at tracks or plants, trying to show her something. She nodded, though most of it made little sense. Still, she understood the effort. He wanted to communicate. At midday, they reached a jagged outcrop of rock. The alien gestured for her to stop. He scanned the horizon, then crouched, pressing his hand to the ground. His claws dug into the sand and pulled out a root thick and moist. He broke it in half and handed her a piece. She stared at it. Poison? A test? He bit his half first, chewed, and swallowed. Then waited. Her stomach clenched, but hunger and thirst burned sharper. She bit into the root. Bitter liquid filled her mouth, but it was water. Real water. She drank greedily. When she looked at him again, his golden eyes seemed softer. He had shared his secret. For the first time, she felt the edge of fear dull just slightly. But as they settled in the shade of the rocks, a shadow moved above them. Ilara lifted her eyes. Across the ridge, sharp yellow eyes glowed in the dark cracks. The predators had followed, and now she and the alien would face them, together. The air turned cold as the shadows crept closer. Ilara's skin prickled. She gripped the jagged shard tighter, her heart thumping so hard she could hear it. The alien, Kyle, though she did not know his name yet, lifted his head slowly. His golden eyes narrowed at the movement above them. A growl echoed across the rocks. From the ridge, a creature crawled into view. Its body was long, scaled, and covered with ridges that shimmered in the dim light. 4 limbs clawed against the stone, and its head twisted unnaturally, showing rows of sharp, wet teeth. Behind it, 2 more followed, their eyes glowing like burning coals. Ilara gasped, stepping back until her shoulder hit the stone wall. Her mind screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The desert stretched behind them, endless and open. The predators would chase them down easily. Kale moved in front of her, though his body shook from his wounds. He reached for a broken piece of his armor, raising it like a shield. His breathing grew heavy, but he stood tall, his broad frame blocking her view. The first creature leapt from the ridge. It landed on the sand with a hiss, claws sinking deep. Its head snapped toward them. Then it charged. Ilara froze, panic locking her legs. But Kale roared, a sound so loud it shook the air. He threw himself forward, meeting the beast head-on. The two crashed in a storm of claws and teeth. Sand sprayed. The sound of snapping jaws filled her ears. Ilara's fear broke. She raised her shard of metal and screamed, rushing toward the fight. The second creature darted around, eyes fixed on her. It lunged. She swung wildly, the shard slicing across its snout. The beast shrieked, snapping its head back, blood spilling dark against its scales. Pain burned through her arm as its claw grazed her skin. She stumbled, almost falling, but forced herself up again. She could not stop. If she fell, she was dead. Kale wrestled with the first predator, his claws digging into its throat. The beast twisted, snapping at his face. He pushed with all his strength, slamming it against the rocks. Bones cracked. The predator went limp, its body falling silent. But the third one was still there. It circled, its tail whipping the sand. Ilara's breath came ragged. She tried to steady her shard, but her hands shook so much she could hardly aim. Then Kyle barked something in his strange language, sharp and commanding. He pointed toward the creature, then at her, then back at himself. She did not know the words, but she understood. Together, the predator lunged. Kale struck from the side, slamming his shield of armor into its head. The creature reeled but turned toward him with fury. That was her chance. Ilara ran forward, raising her shard high. She stabbed with every ounce of strength she had. The shard pierced soft flesh under its jaw. The beast let out a terrible scream, thrashing violently. Sand tore beneath its claws. Ilara held on, teeth clenched until finally it collapsed, twitching once before falling still. Silence fell. Her body shook uncontrollably. She dropped the shard, her breath ragged, her hands covered in dark blood that wasn't her own. She wanted to collapse, to curl into the sand and disappear. But when she lifted her eyes, Kale was looking at her. His golden eyes glowed, not with anger, but something different. Respect? For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. No words were spoken, yet everything was said. They had survived. Ilara's chest tightened. This alien, this enemy, had risked his life to protect her. And she had done the same for him. Still trembling, she whispered, We did it." Kyle tilted his head as if trying to understand her tone. Then he gave a slow nod. But as the bodies of the predators cooled in the sand, Ilara realized something more terrifying. Their blood carried a strong, sharp scent. The wind picked it up, carrying it across the desert. Predators hunted by smell. And more would come. Ilara tightened her fists, fear rising again. Surviving one attack had been a miracle. Surviving the next? That would take more than luck. The sun rose higher, turning the sand into a mirror of fire. Ilara's throat burned, her body heavy from exhaustion. The 3 dead predators lay behind them, half buried in the sand. Flies already buzzed around the bodies, and the stench of blood spread with the wind. They could not stay. Kale limped forward, his hand pressed against his side. Ilara followed, carrying the shard of metal tightly in her fist. She felt weaker with every step, but she refused to stop. Behind them, the desert stretched like a sea of endless gold. Ahead, jagged cliffs rose into the haze, offering some hope of shelter. By midday, they found shade under a broken arch of stone. Both collapsed, gasping for air. For a long time, there was only silence, the kind of silence that felt louder than screams. Ilara's hands trembled as she pulled her knees to her chest. She glanced at Kale. He was peeling away part of his armor, revealing thick, ridged skin beneath. His wound had darkened, swelling. She knew infection when she saw it. If it spread, he would die. He caught her staring. For a moment, she thought he would snarl or turn away. Instead, he drew lines in the sand with one claw. Strange shapes, symbols, then he pointed at himself. "Ilara," she whispered, pressing her palm to her chest. Then she pointed back at him. Kyle blinked. He tapped his chest once, then growled a sound low and rough. "Kyle." Her lips parted. His name. She repeated it awkwardly. "Kyle." He tilted his head as if surprised she had tried. Then, for the first time, his mouth curled into something close to a smile. The wall between them cracked just a little. The next hours turned into clumsy lessons. He would draw in the sand, pointing at rocks, at the sun, at her. She answered with words in her own language. Stone. Sun. Woman. Sometimes he repeated, sometimes he failed, and sometimes he laughed. A deep rolling sound that startled her. She found herself laughing too, in short, nervous bursts. When he showed her how to dig roots from beneath the sand, he said a word she could not repeat properly. He shook his head, repeating it slowly until she managed. He gave a sharp nod, eyes glinting with approval. She felt warmth inside her chest, strange and confusing, but the warmth was brief. At nightfall, the storms came. Green lightning split the sky. The wind howled like a living thing, carrying sand that cut into their skin. They huddled close beneath the stone arch, Kyle shielding her with his broad frame. She wanted to push away, but the storm's fury made her cling tighter. Every crack of thunder reminded her of the predators. If they attacked now, she and Kale were finished. She stayed awake, her heart racing, listening to the storm rage. When morning returned, Kale's wound looked worse. His skin was pale around it, his body shivering. He tried to stand but fell to one knee. Alara rushed to his side, grabbing his arm. "Stay down," she whispered, though he couldn't understand. She remembered her training, basic field medicine. But she had no supplies, no antiseptic, only the desert, so she searched. She left Kale beneath the stone and wandered farther than she dared. Her legs shook, her throat screamed for water, but she pressed on. And then she saw them. Plants with glowing blue stems hidden in a crack of rock. She pulled one, snapping it open. Liquid dripped, cool and sharp-smelling. It reminded her of antiseptic back home. Her hope lit like fire. She carried the plants back, knees bruised, arms bleeding from thorns. Kyle lay weak, eyes half closed. She pressed the liquid against his wound. He cried out, muscles locking, his claws digging into the sand. She almost stopped, but she forced herself to continue. Finally, his body relaxed. His breathing slowed. His eyes fluttered open and fixed on her. Golden, tired, but alive. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Alara whispered, "I'm not leaving you." He could not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. He raised his hand weakly, brushing it across hers. The contact was brief, clumsy, but it was enough. They were no longer just survivors, they were becoming something more. The days bled into each other like shadows in the sand. Alara and Kale grew thinner, their clothes torn, their skin burned from the relentless sun. Yet they survived. The roots Kale found gave them water. The animals she trapped gave them food. Still, his wound did not heal. Every morning, Alara checked him. The swelling had spread. His breaths were shallow, his body trembling. She pressed her ear to his chest one night and heard a rattling inside. Infection was winning, he knew it too. His golden eyes, once bright, had dimmed. Sometimes, when he thought she was not watching, he pressed his hand to the wound as if trying to hold himself together. Alara hated the helplessness clawing inside her. She had saved him once, but it was not enough. She needed something stronger, something that could truly heal. And then she remembered the glowing plants. The antiseptic liquid had slowed the infection. Perhaps more could cure it. She set out at dawn, leaving Kale in the shade of the stone arch. "Stay alive," she whispered, though she knew he could not understand. His eyes lingered on her as she walked into the desert alone. Hours passed. Her legs ached, her lips cracked, her mind swirled with heat. She pushed on, scanning every crack in the rocks for that blue glow. When she finally saw it hidden deep inside a narrow crevice, her chest filled with hope. But the hope turned to terror when a growl echoed from inside the shadows. A massive predator crawled into view, larger than the ones before. Its body was armored in thick scales, its jaw wider, dripping with venom. The glowing plants grew behind it, out of reach. Alara froze. Her shard of metal felt like nothing against such a beast. She could run. She could return to Kale with nothing. He would die slowly and she might live a little longer, or she could fight for the plants. She might win and save Kale. She might die trying. Her body shook, fear gnawing at her. She pictured Kale's tired eyes, his weak voice trying to say his name to her again. She remembered his hand brushing hers, a silent promise he had no words for. And suddenly the choice did not feel like a choice at all. She screamed and rushed forward. The predator lunged, jaws snapping. She threw herself to the side, rolling across the sand. Pain ripped through her leg as its claws grazed her, tearing skin. She bit back a cry and pushed up, stabbing the shard into its side. The blade scraped against scales, barely breaking skin. The beast roared, swinging its tail. The force slammed her into the rock. Her vision blurred. Blood dripped from her temple. Still, she dragged herself up, clutching the shard tighter. The glowing plant shimmered just beyond the beast. She feinted left, then darted right, slipping under its belly. She plunged the shard upward with all her strength. This time it sank deep between the scales. The creature shrieked, twisting violently. Alara yanked the shard free and stabbed again. The predator collapsed, thrashing once before falling silent. Alara fell to her knees, gasping, her arms trembling so badly she could barely move. Blood ran down her leg, but she crawled forward. She tore the glowing plants from the rock, clutching them to her chest as if they were treasure. When she returned to Cale, her body was half broken, but she held the plants out. His golden eyes widened, a mix of shock and relief. He tried to rise, but she pushed him down gently. "Don't move," she whispered, crushing the stems, letting the glowing liquid drip onto his wound. He roared in pain, his claws digging into the stone, but she held firm, whispering, "Live, please live." The glow seeped into his skin. The swelling began to fade. His breathing steadied. Slowly his eyes closed, not from death but from rest. Alara collapsed beside him, blood soaking her leg. She had chosen pain. She had chosen risk. She had chosen him, and in that moment she knew she would do it again. The desert was silent when Alara opened her eyes. Her body ached, her leg throbbed, but the first thing she saw was Cale. He was still lying on the stone floor, but his chest rose and fell steadily. His color looked stronger, the dark swelling fading from his wound. She let out a shaky laugh, covering her face with her hands. "You lived," she whispered, her voice breaking. Kyle stirred, his golden eyes blinking open. He turned his head slowly, focusing on her. For a long time he said nothing. Then with effort he lifted his hand. His clawed fingers brushed against her wrist. Weak, clumsy, but gentle. Alara gripped his hand tightly. She didn't care anymore that he was alien, enemy, or other. He was alive. Days passed. Cale's strength returned little by little. He could stand again, though he still leaned on the rock for balance. Alara's leg wound healed slower, and sometimes she limped, but Kyle supported her without hesitation. She hated needing help, but his patience softened the shame. Their communication grew. She repeated words for water, food, sun, night. He echoed them, then taught her his own versions. Sometimes they laughed at their mistakes, sitting in the shade, drawing pictures in the sand like children. Other times they argued in gestures when she wanted to go one way and he insisted on another. But one truth became clear. Alone, neither could survive. Together they had hope. One evening they sat near a small fire built from dry roots. The green sky shifted to purple as two moons rose above the desert. Alara leaned against the rock, exhaustion weighing her down. Cale sat close, his warmth a comfort against the cold night. She glanced at him. His face, though ridged and strange, no longer filled her with fear. His golden eyes were steady, calm. She thought of how he had fought for her, bled for her, and nearly died because of her choice. Without thinking, she whispered, "You're not my enemy anymore." He tilted his head, not understanding the words but sensing the tone. His gaze softened. He reached up, touching the symbol he had once drawn in the sand for his name. Then he pressed his hand lightly against her chest, repeating her name. Alara. Her throat tightened. In that moment, the desert no longer felt so empty. But peace never lasted long on this world. The next day, a storm rolled in faster than before. Winds howled, carrying clouds of sand so thick they could not see more than a few steps ahead. Alara clung to Cale's arm as they stumbled forward, searching for shelter. Through the roar she heard it, a sharp metallic beep. She froze, her heart skipping. It was faint but clear, a distress beacon. She looked at Cale with wide eyes, then pointed toward the sound. His expression hardened, but he nodded. Together they fought the storm until they found it. Half buried in the sand, a cracked beacon from the wreckage. Alara fell to her knees, brushing sand away. The light still blinked, though weakly. She pressed the button, praying it still worked. The machine crackled, sending a faint signal into the storm. "We can be saved," she gasped, tears stinging her eyes. Cale knelt beside her, his expression unreadable. He touched the beacon, then looked at her. His golden eyes were troubled, almost sad. She frowned. "What? This is good. Someone will come." But deep inside she knew. Rescue could mean separation. Rescue could mean chains for him. The storm raged around them, covering their faces with sand. Alara gripped the beacon tighter, torn between hope and dread. Cale whispered something in his tongue, a sound low and filled with sorrow. His eyes never left hers, and in that moment, Alara understood something terrifying. Her survival was no longer the only thing she wanted. She wanted him. The storm raged for hours, burying the desert in walls of sand. Ilara and Kale huddled near the beacon, shielding it from the wind as its faint signal pulsed into the void above. Every blink of the light was a promise help might come, but each blink was also a warning. If her people answered, Kale would not be seen as a survivor. He would be seen as a prisoner. When the storm cleared, the desert lay quiet again. The beacon's light blinked steadily, stronger now. Ilara stared at it, her chest tight. Kale sat beside her, his golden eyes fixed on the horizon. His expression was unreadable, but his shoulders were tense. She wondered if he was thinking the same thing she was. What would happen when a ship landed? Days passed. Food grew scarce. They rationed water, shared roots, and kept the fire burning at night. Yet every time she looked at the beacon, her heart sank. Rescue was coming. She wanted it, and she dreaded it. On the 5th morning, she heard it, the low hum of engines in the sky. She leapt to her feet, eyes scanning the horizon. A shadow cut across the sun, growing larger. A ship, human design. Her throat closed. They were saved. Kale rose slowly, his gaze locked on the ship. His claws curled at his sides. He took one step back, then another. Ilara turned to him. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Don't run." He looked at her, his eyes burning with fear and pride. He knew what her people would do to him. The ship descended, stirring sand into whirlwinds. A hatch opened, and human soldiers stepped out, weapons raised. Ilara Hart, one of them shouted over the roar of engines. "Step away from the alien." "Come here now." Her body froze. The words pierced her like knives. "Step away. Leave Kyle." Pretend none of this had happened, but she couldn't. Kyle's hand brushed hers. His eyes held no anger, only resignation. He was ready to face whatever came. He had accepted his fate. Ilara's chest ached. She saw flashes of every moment they had shared. The night he shielded her from predators, the way he had taught her to find water, the way he whispered her name in his broken voice. And she knew the truth. She loved him. The soldiers shouted again, aiming their rifles. "Move away from him, Ilara." Her heart pounded. She stepped forward, not away from Kale, but closer to him. She gripped his hand tightly, lifting it for everyone to see. Gasps echoed from the soldiers. "This alien is with me," she shouted, her voice raw but steady. "He saved my life. He's not my enemy. If you want to take him, you'll have to take me too." The soldiers hesitated, their eyes darting between each other. Orders buzzed in their earpieces. The officer at the front scowled. "You don't understand, Ilara. That thing is dangerous." "He's not human." Ilara shook her head fiercely. "He's more human than you know." Kale squeezed her hand. His golden eyes softened, and he whispered her name again. "Ilara." The silence stretched. Finally, the officer lowered his weapon. The others followed. The ship engines hummed as the ramp extended farther. Ilara and Kyle stepped forward together, hand in hand, into the uncertain light of rescue. She knew the future would not be easy. There would be questions, fear, and judgment. But she also knew one thing with absolute clarity. She was no longer just surviving. She was living, for him, with him, and deep inside, beneath the scars of the desert, a new life was already growing inside her. Proof of a bond no war or border could break.